Hey guys, welcome back to the channel where you can find all of your basic guides on Total War. Today we'll be covering the types of spells in Warhammer 2. There are quite a few different types of spells and each of them have their own specialty uses. Before we go over the many different types of spells, let me just briefly cover Overcasting and Miscasting. Overcasting a spell increases and or changes the spell effects. This costs extra winds of magic and also has a risk of resulting in a miscast, which damages the spellcaster, although the spell will still be cast with the extra overcast effects. To overcast a spell, all you need to do is double click the spell before casting or setting a target. Spells that can be overcast will have a small double arrow on their button in the battle UI. On another note, when choosing targets for your damaging spells, you should be mindful of their tooltips. Some spells are best cast on single entities, while others are best cast versus multiple units. And also, some spells are good against armor, while others are weak against armor. If you look at the spell tooltip, you'll be able to see the strengths of the spell. So in the example, we see Pit of Shades. Its tooltip says it is strong against multiple units and good against armor, meaning our target for this spell will be heavily armored infantry. But if we look at a spell like Spirit Leech, you can see it is best used against single entities like lords, heroes, and monstrous units, so we won't be using these against infantry. Now let's get into the different spells. First we have augment spells. These are buff spells that increase a friendly unit's power or stats, or gives them a specific attribute like fear or terror. Pretty useful for buffing low tier units to put up a decent fight against higher tier units depending on the augment spell. Or you could even just buff up some elite units to watch them grind up your enemies even faster. Regeneration spells are buff spells that cause friendly units to heal over time, or even raise them from the dead like the regrowth spell. These are just useful for ensuring your units last as long as they can on the battlefield. You could also use the regeneration spells once the battle is over to get some extra healing to your units before you hit the end battle button. Hex spells are debuffs that weaken enemy units, lowering their stats, preventing their movement, or causing them to suffer from fear or terror. One example being the Net of Amentok, which completely immobilizes a unit. These are pretty useful for debuffing elite units on the battlefield or enemy lords and heroes. Magic missile spells shoot a missile across the battlefield towards the enemy like Fireball. Magic missiles can miss or be blocked by terrain like trees. These are high damage single target spells that should mainly be used for targeting lords, heroes, or monstrous units. Wind spells travel in a straight line, doing damage and or knocking enemies down like Wind of Death. This is useful for casting down the frontline engagement to ensure you maximize the damage area of the spell. Breath spells are similar to wind spells, but these have a cone-shaped area of effect rather than a rectangular shape, like the Pestilent Breath. These also can be aimed in a specific direction. Preferably you want to aim these at clusters of enemies. Also, your target depends on whether or not the breath is good against armored units or unarmored units. Direct damage spells are fairly self-explanatory. They deal direct damage to enemy units, like the Fate of Buna. These spells are cast on target and will slowly do damage over time. You can actually be quite effective with these kinds of spells, as some of them are an area of effect damage spell. If they are, try casting the spell on an enemy unit that is surrounded by other enemy units. Bombardment spells target an area or enemy unit and bombard them from above with damaging missiles like the Comet of Cassandra. Like most spells, you'll want to cast these bombardment spells on large clusters of enemies. Explosion spells cause violent explosions outwards from a central point, damaging and knocking them back, more like the Foot of Gork. These should be used similarly to the bombardment spells. Vortex spells are probably one of the most devastating. These are vortexes that stay on the battlefield for some time, damaging all nearby units, friendly or foe. Most vortex spells move randomly, though some stay still and some home in on the enemies. These are best cast on enemy clusters when they are approaching or surrounding one of your heroes or lords. Lastly, there are summon spells, which summon new units to the battlefield. In most cases, these will decay over time and fully crumble away. They are very useful in disrupting the back line or even summoning them behind your enemy front line to get a surround on them. That's all we have for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you found this video helpful, make sure you drop a like and leave a comment. Also, subscribe if you haven't already.